Brandon goes to the hospital to confront Emma. Frightened, Emma tries to wheel away, but Brandon stops her. He asks why she reported him as a fraud while he isn't. Emma believes her mom is lazy and wouldn't lose weight, so she assumes Brandon must be scamming her. Frustrated, Brandon pushes her wheelchair through the hospital. Emma worries everyone is staring at her, but Brandon reminds her she isn't a celebrity and no one cares enough to mock her. Brandon then puts her in his car and drives to the park, ignoring her threats to call the police. There, he shows her Dorothy running lap after lap. Dorothy once struggled with even 10 kilometers, but now she completes it easily. Brandon also urges Emma to treat her mom better. Emma meets Dorothy's workout friends, Mr. Wang and his son, who happily greet her and compliment how pretty she is. But as more people gather, Emma feels anxious and has a panic attack, so Brandon takes her back to the hospital. However, she seems to draw strength from her mother's example and climbs into the car on her own. Dorothy spots her from afar and is overjoyed. Meanwhile, Alice stays at school to finish a magazine article, giving her more chances to talk to Henry. The next morning, she returns home to Karen's complaints that Alice neglected her, saying she didn't eat properly because Alice wasn't there and make Alice feels guilty. During breakfast, Karen tries to ask about Alice's relationship with Henry. But Alice insists they're just friends. That evening, Henry invites Alice to a friend's party. She declines at first, but Henry keeps persuading her, and she finally agrees to go out with him. She lies to Karen, saying she needs to go to school to finish a manuscript due the next day. Alice goes with Henry and they go roller skating together, giving them more chances to spend time close to each other. Later that night, Henry and his friend drop Alice off at home. Karen, still awake, sees this and questions Alice when she comes in. Alice keeps her time with Henry a secret, which annoys Karen, who scolds her for hiding things. Karen picked up an old table from the street and cleans it to set up an altar in the middle of the house with photos of her husband and Peter. Alice disapproves, as they're renting and the landlord doesn't allow it, but Karen does it anyway. Alice had hoped that she and her mother could move forward and live happily, but it seems Karen prefers to keep the atmosphere heavy and controlling. Alice suggests her mom focus on something new, like her Aunt Dorothy stays positive and exercises every day. Karen dismisses this, saying Dorothy's cheerfulness is fake and that, unlike Dorothy, she doesn't need to exercise because she's already thin. Alice is speechless. The next day, Emma finally gets to leave the hospital. Dorothy and David take her home, where they have prepared and decorated to welcome her back. Everyone enjoys a meal together and toasts to Emma's new beginning. Later that night, when Emma and David get intimate, he suddenly stops. He claims it's because he doesn't want to hurt her wound, but Emma knows the real reason is her broken legs. The next day, David goes to work, leaving Emma at home with Dorothy. Dorothy sadly discovers that Emma has held in her need to use the bathroom all night to avoid bothering David. Emma continues to suffer from phantom limb pain at night. Each time David acts like he cares, but when Dorothy tells him to go rest and let her deal with it, he agrees almost right away. Brandon notices that Dorothy looks tired while exercising, so he asks her about it. She shares that Emma is suffering from phantom limb pain every night and Dorothy stayed up late to be by her side. Brandon advises her to consider getting Emma a prosthetic leg, which could help relieve the pain over time. Meanwhile, David goes to his parents' house to catch up on sleep. They blame Dorothy for not taking better care of Emma, saying it's causing David to suffer, and they ask about Emma's future plans, bringing up the topic of having children. That night, David and Emma don't speak to each other at dinner, they only eat in silence. Dorothy privately tells David that he should sleep in her room while she takes the sofa, so he can get enough rest for work, as he has become the sole breadwinner. David initially refuses but later agrees. Emma feels sad when she sees her husband sleeping away from her. Alice can't stop thinking about her outing with Henry, but she heard from her friend Nicole that Henry is a playboy and that makes her anxious. Henry calls Alice to tell her about a task that requires her to accompany him to another city for a follow-up interview. Alice agrees and lies to her mother, saying she's going with a female professor. Karen doesn't believe her and tries to check Alice's phone but can't unlock it. Alice quickly leaves with Henry. On the train, they share a beer, and Alice opens up about her family. Suddenly, Henry pretends to have a stomachache, causing Alice to panic, but it turns out to be a joke. He then reveals he is the classmate of her friend and that he was the person she helped treat the other night. Henry confesses to Alice that he has had a crush on her since that moment and has quietly pursued her. Alice, who also likes Henry, accepts his feelings. Meanwhile, Emma and David's relationship worsen. Emma feels insecure about her appearance and believes David no longer loves her and only feels pity for her. David argues that Emma is being unreasonable, accusing her of trying to bring others down to share in her misery. Even though her accident wasn't their fault, Dorothy returns from her workout and tries to intervene. She apologizes to David on behalf of her daughter, but he tells her it's okay, he just needs some fresh air. Emma wishes for David to show her love like he used to, but her behavior only drives him away. The next day, David's parents visit. Though they secretly dislike Emma and Dorothy, they act concerned, scolding David for not properly caring for his wife. They again bring up their wish for grandchildren. Dorothy, knowing Emma can't have children but keeps it for herself, just telling them that it's up to the young couple. Later, David pulls his parents aside, telling them he's frustrated they brought up such private matters in front of Emma, saying she'll hold it against him. They grow angry hearing Emma argues with him and urge him to consider divorce. David hesitates, worried people will judge him for leaving a sick wife. They then suggest he stay with them during the week and visit Emma only on weekends. David is unsure, but Dorothy later agrees, thinking it might be best for everyone right now. Emma is heartbroken watching David packs to leave, but she tries to accept it for her dignity. Dorothy encourages her to stay hopeful, insisting that if she stays positive, David will come back to her. But Emma thinks it isn't so simple. He hasn't shown her any affection since she lost her legs. Meanwhile in Beijing, Karen becomes more controlling with Alice, insisting she find a local boyfriend who can support both of them. If not, she'll have to return to their hometown for work. Karen guilt-trips Alice, accusing her of wanting to leave her mother behind, and even brings up Peter, saying he would never abandon her. Under pressure, Alice blurts out that she has a boyfriend. Karen immediately insists on meeting him and demands Alice bring him home for an introduction. Alice spends the day with Henry, but still unsure if he's serious about her, so she asks if he'd be open to meeting her mom. Henry seems completely cool with the idea. That evening, Alice brings him home for dinner. Karen is thrilled to see that Alice's boyfriend is Henry, and her attitude noticeably softens. However, Alice feels uneasy that her mom might turn her genuine relationship into something more calculating, so she warns Henry to be cautious. The next morning, Dorothy has her usual run in the park, but she has another blood sugar drop and ends up in the hospital. Worried that Emma might neglect herself, Dorothy asks Brandon to bring food to Emma and help her out. When Emma realizes her mother isn't back and doesn't answer her calls, she begins to worry. She tries to contact David for help, but he's on a business trip and offers to ask his mom instead. Emma declines, not wanting to bother her. Brandon then arrives at Emma's place, opens the electronic door that with the code Dorothy gave him. He walks around the house like Emma is invisible, and that pisses her off. Brandon then explains Dorothy's situation, which makes Emma anxious, though she's unable to do much herself. Brandon stays to watch over Emma, as Dorothy requested. Unlike Brandon doesn't try to be nice to Emma because she has disability, and Emma is full of pride, so she doesn't like to ask him for any favor and struggle to do everything on her own. Even so, Emma reassures her mother that everything is fine at home so she can rest without worry in the hospital. That night, Emma experiences phantom limb pain again. Brandon calmly gets the first aid kit and carefully wraps Emma's remaining limb with gauze to signal to her brain that her leg is no longer there, which helps reduce the pain. Emma is surprised that Brandon doesn't act scared of her wound. Brandon urges Emma to get a prosthetic leg, but she believes it won't make any difference and will only humiliate her more. He thinks Emma is being too selfish and tells her that she needs the prosthetic to take care of herself and her mother and to live her life, insisting she should stop using her loss as an excuse. Brandon doesn't sugarcoat his words, and his honesty opens Emma's eyes to many things no one dared to tell her before. Dorothy worries about her daughter and comes back to check on her. However, Brandon reassures her that Emma is fine and can take care of herself. He then tells Dorothy to go back to the hospital. Meanwhile, Karen follows Henry and informs Alice that he is a true playboy, dating a different girl every day. When Henry spots her, he quickly leaves. Alice feels embarrassed to learn that her mother has been following Henry, but Karen believes it's better to be safe than sorry. Alice is furious, thinking her mother looks down on her, believing she isn't worthy of someone like Henry, which is why she is so anxious. Karen wants Alice to hurry up and find a husband in Beijing, insisting that they should ask Henry and his parents directly about their relationship as it progresses. Alice tells her mother that she's not as naive as Karen thinks, and if Karen wants Henry to be his son-in-law, she needs to stay out of it. She wants to take her time and let Henry take the lead. When he falls in love and can't live without her, she will starts to ask him what she wants. Emma asks Brandon to take her to the hospital to see Dorothy. However, he drives her to his house instead. It turns out Dorothy isn't at the hospital, she has been at Brandon's place the whole time. Brandon planned this trick to help Emma become more independent and lift her spirit. After spending a few days with Brandon, Emma's mindset shifts. She stops blaming others and treating those around her poorly. Emma and her mom then go to the hospital to learn about the options of prosthetic leg for her. With modern technology, the prosthetic will implant electrodes into her body that connect to the nerves, allowing her to control them easily. That evening, Emma shares the news with David. He happily tells her to buy the best one, no matter the cost, which brings joy to the whole family. David also notices the positive change in Emma's mood and feels very happy. Emma is hopeful she'll be able to dance again with her prosthetic legs. However, achieving that goal means frequent trips to the hospital for precise fittings, physical therapy, and rehabilitation. David wants to support her, but his demanding job at the bank keeps him tied up, and Emma understands, as he's now the sole income earner. That evening, David also has to be back at the office to work overtime, and his manager Linda is there as well. She thanks David for covering for her recently when she had to leave work unexpectedly for personal reasons. As they talk, David opens up about Emma, and Linda shares her own struggles caring for her paralyzed mother. Her mother recently moved in with her after living with Linda's brother, where her sister-in-law wasn't comfortable with the arrangement. Balancing work and caregiving has been tough for Linda, and she and David find themselves connecting over their similar situations. After seeing Karen following him, Henry acts cold towards Alice. However, she continues to speak gently with him. She lies to Henry that Karen only wanted to talk to Henry about job opportunities for her but felt a bit shy about it, that why she just following him around. Alice also tells Henry not to feel obligated to introduce her to his parents, as what matters most to her is they simply being together. Henry, softened again by Alice's charm, offers to help her find a job, but she lies, saying she just received second interview invitations from 3 companies. Then, she invites him out for dinner, and Henry's mood brightens up again. At night, they post their first couple's photo together and share their first kiss. Henry even asks Alice to spend the night, but she gently declines, saying she'd like to save the best for last, and he respects her decision. At work, David and Linda grow closer as friends. Linda, curious, asks him how he and his beautiful wife ended up together. David proudly shares their love story, how he had pursued Emma for 8 years, ever since they were schoolmates. Meanwhile, Emma attends her prosthetic fitting appointment with her mother, Dorothy. She feels disappointed that David couldn't be there and instead sent money to compensate for his absence. She knows he is a perfectionist, and while he once adored her looks, she worries that now she's lost what he once valued so highly. David's parents grow increasingly resentful toward Emma and Dorothy. They look for reasons to push David toward a divorce and even suspect Emma may not be able to have children. They want to see her medical records from the accident to check, upon learning that Emma's uterus was damaged and that she will likely be unable to have children. David's mother, furious, calls him over. When David arrives, his parents insist he should leave Emma. His mother coldly argues that a woman who can't bear children is even worse off than a woman who has lost her legs. She then calls Dorothy, berating her for hiding this fact. Dorothy and Emma are in a meeting with a prosthetic salesperson when Dorothy steps out to take the call, not wanting Emma to overhear the hurtful insults. Dorothy takes full responsibility, apologizing and explaining she never told anyone, including Emma, because she wanted to spare them from more heartache. David overhears this on the phone and reassures Dorothy, saying he doesn't care if Emma can have children or not, he loves her unconditionally. His parents chase him around the house, enraged, as David finally drops to his knees, pleading with them to accept his love for Emma. Meanwhile, Emma finishes her meeting with the prosthetics consultant, who guarantees a high-quality product with free aftercare. However, another staff member discreetly warns Emma about possible quality concerns, giving her his contact information. Emma and Dorothy find his warning a bit strange but don't dwell on it. Later, Karen calls Dorothy to brag about Alice's new boyfriend. Alice arrives home, annoyed by her mother's exaggerated stories to her aunt, full of lies and insensitive boasting. Despite this, Dorothy is genuinely happy for Alice. After the call, Karen starts questioning Alice about not coming home the previous night. Alice insists she stayed at the dorm, but Karen is unconvinced. Karen has also opened Alice's mail without permission and knows Alice was rejected from every company she applied to. She nags her to ask Henry to help her find a job, but Alice wants to keep her relationship sincere and doesn't want to take advantage of Henry, fearing that David's work might be affected by Emma's condition. Dorothy goes to his bank to explain the family situation to David's boss, hoping he might offer some understanding and support. Dorothy meets Linda, who leads her to see the chairman. The chairman listens sympathetically and reveals that, despite his family obligations, David still maintains the top performance in his department. Meanwhile, Karen meets with Henry to discuss job opportunities for Alice, pressing him to take responsibility as her boyfriend and urging him to talk to his family about a potential marriage. Henry is shocked, as he and Alice have only been dating for a few days, and his family doesn't typically interfere in his personal relationships. Karen changes the subject. Warning Henry not to take advantage of her precious daughter, Emma finally tries on her prosthetic leg, thrilled to be walking again. However, she needs to practice to adjust to it. Emma pushes herself too hard and ends up hurting herself. Dorothy feels heartbroken seeing that. Meanwhile, although David claims to love Emma, he fears visiting her each weekend and facing the reality of her no longer being as perfect as she once was. He and Linda go to a cafe together to gather their thoughts before returning home to their respective family responsibilities. The words he said to others about his love and acceptance for Emma may be just his way of convincing himself. David informs Dorothy and Emma that he has been awarded model employee at his bank, thanks to his performance and Dorothy's supportive words last time with the chairman. After dinner, David spends time helping Emma practice walking with her prosthetic, and the two hug. But just as Emma begins to feel her husband has truly accepted her, David still becomes nauseous upon seeing her amputated legs, and Emma realizes it's still too much for him to fully accept. Meanwhile, Henry arranges an interview for Alice at Mr. Zhong's company, a family acquaintance, for a writer position at his business magazine. Mr. Zhong casually mentions Henry's parents are eager to meet Henry's girlfriend soon. Henry, however, has kept his relationship with Alice a secret, even though she's right there in front of them. Mr. Zhong assumes Henry and Alice are only friends, so he simply tells Alice to leave her contact information and promises they'll review her application. However, Mr. Zhong later sees Henry and Alice holding hands. Henry finally admits that Alice is his girlfriend and explains he initially kept it secret to avoid his parents' inevitable interrogation. Upon learning Alice is Henry's girlfriend, Mr. Zhong immediately arranges a position for her. Meanwhile, Emma goes to the park to watch her mother exercise. There, she talks to Brandon about wanting to practice walking with her prosthetic but feeling discouraged after her wounds constantly reopened and became infected. Brandon doesn't hesitate to help by redressing her wounds. He shows no fear, unlike David. Brandon explains that he has experience caring for a relative who also uses a prosthetic. Henry's mother quickly learns that Henry helped Alice get the job. She calls, scolding him for going to a family contact without consulting her, as now the family owes Mr. Zhong a favor, and if he ever needs something, Henry's father will have to comply. Henry also tells Alice that Karen came to see him. Alice presses him for more details, but Henry dislikes being questioned, feeling increasingly suffocated as his mother, Alice, and Karen all demand answers. Henry starts to get cold feet and finds himself at odds with Alice. Danny, a friend of Henry's, advises him that Karen seems like a typical overbearing mother from a small town and warns that if Henry wants to be with Alice, he'll have to get used to Karen's demands. Meanwhile, Alice tells Karen to stop interfering in her love life. Karen refuses, questioning whether Alice has slept with Henry yet, emphasizing that virginity is the most important for a woman. Unable to stand her mother anymore, Alice tells Karen to go back to their hometown. When Karen continues, Alice decides she will be the one to leave. Left alone, Karen cries, wondering why everyone abandons her, unaware of how her toxicity pushes people away. David's bank wants to do a family interview with him, so Dorothy and Emma clean and prepare the house for visitors. Emma realizes that Dorothy had gone to David's boss to help secure his recent award, which she knows was meant to encourage him to stay with her. However, her heart sinks when she sees David spraying air freshener throughout the house, likely to cover up the smell of her infected leg. Emma decides to wear her prosthetic leg to seem more positive in front of the guests. During the interview, Dorothy repeatedly praises David for being such a strong and supportive husband, though Emma knows this isn't entirely true. Everything goes smoothly until, as everyone is leaving, Emma's leg gives out and she stumbles. David catches her and lifts her up, and the photographer snaps a few pictures of the moment. Unlike Karen's controlling ways, Henry's mom is quite relaxed about her son's relationship and prefers he make his own choices. Alice hesitates to join Mr. Jones' company right away, wanting to prove she can get a job on her own, so she decides to hold off on signing her contract. She's also staying in the dorm to avoid further conflict with her mother. That night, Henry calls and invites her over since his parents are away for work. Alice goes, and after a few drinks, they end up spending the night together. Meanwhile, Karen, worried about Alice, waits outside her dorm. When Alice returns in the morning, Karen realizes she stayed overnight with Henry. Though Karen apologizes for being harsh, she quickly shifts to criticizing Alice and gets upset, thinking her daughter has made a big mistake. Feeling frustrated with her mother's behavior, Alice buys her a ticket to go back home and decides she won't put up with Karen's control anymore. David's recent promotion now makes him feel even more pressured to take care of Emma. To keep up appearances, David's father suggests he should move back home with her to show appreciation for Dorothy's help with his promotion. David agrees, but he's uncomfortable and expresses to his mother how much he fears the smell from Emma's infected leg. Playing the victim, he makes his mother worry and suspect that Dorothy is trying to trap him in the relationship with Emma. David avoids showing his discomfort directly to Emma, but he often claims he has to work overtime to avoid spending the night with her. He even suggests to Dorothy that he'll do the heavy chores, while she handles more personal care for Emma, mostly to avoid touching his wife. Dorothy keeps up a cheerful appearance but realizes his intentions and offers her room to him, while she will sleep with Emma. Emma overhears everything, feeling devastated. Dorothy tries to comfort her, telling her that if she were in David's place, she might struggle too. She encourages Emma to stay hopeful, assuring her that David will eventually come around.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like for more videos like this.